If you like what you hear on this episode of Let's Talk Mate, Solent Mind's men's mental health chat, keep up to date by liking us on Facebook, subscribing to us on YouTube, and following us on Spotify. Now please enjoy this month's episode.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. So this is another episode of Let's Talk Mate, Solent Mind's men's mental health podcast and chat. So this month we're focusing on anger, or particularly kind of anger management, healthy ways to acknowledge and manage anger. So as usual, I've got a different kind of panel of different people with me today. So we'll start off with some introductions. My name's Rob. I'll be kind of hosting today. I manage the community peer recovery team in Portsmouth for Solent Mind. So I'm just going to go from the top of my screen round. So Loysten, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Loysten. I work in Southampton as part of the peer support team for Solent Mind.
My name's Lou. I work alongside Loysten in peer support as a community peer navigator.
Steve Fletcher. I help facilitate an Andy's Man Club in Gosport, which is a peer-to-peer sport group, and I run Solent Sports Football Club, which is a men's mental health football group.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. So the first kind of talking point I wanted to come to today, in terms of when we think about anger, how can we look at anger as a healthy and kind of normal emotion, and in terms of not just kind of how can we come to accept it, or do we think people struggle with accepting it as a normal and healthy emotion, part of our everyday lives? I'm gonna throw it open to whoever wants to kind of jump in on that one first.
I mean, for myself, my own experiences and stuff, I don't think people accept anger as a normal emotion. And I think that people also don't understand the difference between anger and aggression. And I think we have to accept that anger, like happiness or sadness, is a normal human emotion and you can't get rid of it. But what you can change with regards to anger is the aggression or the behavior associated with anger. And if you manage your anger properly, you won't be seen as aggressive. And I think once we can establish that difference, we can then embrace anger as a normal emotion.
I would say to add to that, I think that the normal emotion of anger is kind of telling you something. It's sort of like a motivation to stand up for yourself. And there's many times in life, in situations when it's fair and just to do that, as long as you control yourself and it doesn't fall into aggression. Otherwise, if you sit with it, you need to be careful not to let you sort of imagine and run wild, and just look at the facts of the situation and step back a little bit from it before you decide to react. But it's very important, like Loysten said, that your reactions and your behaviours is where it boils down to the management issue.
I think you raised a really good point there, Lou, about it is okay to get angry. I'm maybe going to come back to this a bit later, but I don't know about anyone else, but I've lived with my own kind of issues with depression and anxiety, and I remember there were times when the mental health teams would tell me, like, Rob, you've been treated kind of poorly here. It's okay to get angry. It's like, it is okay to get angry and let that out and acknowledge that. Steve, just wonder in terms of the work you do, do you kind of ever have those kind of conversations with your guys about accepting anger as that normal and healthy part of life? And
I think the main thing is, it's fine to get angry about things that you care about, and as somebody I think Lou touched on, as things that affect you. But it's choosing what you get angry about. If it's something you've got no impact on whatsoever, then is there any point wasting that emotion? Is there any point wasting that feeling on something that you can't change?
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of thing I'd always tell people I work with, that you could go around being angry at everything, but it's just going to affect your mental health in the long run. Where actually, if you pick and choose what you're angry about, then actually you get on much better.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and again, it's really kind of fair point as well in terms of maybe looking at things that we all get angry about things, and it comes down to similar to kind of anxiety management as well, I guess, in terms of looking at what can we affect if what we're getting angry about, what what we're getting anxious about, what we're getting angry about, can we affect it? If we've done all we can, then and yeah, and as you say, look, I think it's very important to become angry on occasion. It's important to kind of let that out and acknowledge things. And if we've been poorly treated, sometimes that anger can motivate us to actually kind of seek help, seek support, rectify kind of situations. I mean, so leading on from that question, I guess. So I know this is something that I have struggled with personally, and I'd like to feel, it's something I've worked on over the years. So in your kind of work, do you guys ever kind of come across people who you think maybe, you would almost, you find they don't get angry about things, but they kind of internalize it, or they feel guilty about getting angry, or they struggle, and they do struggle to accept it as that normal kind of healthy emotion, or they view it as a negative emotion?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can think of one person in my mind, and know others as well. And I think that I looked into this recently, actually, because I'm a navigator, so I try and connect people with services. And unfortunately, there is a lack of anger management, sort of free or affordable in Southampton. There's some stuff that we do in Portsmouth, but yeah, I've looked into it before, and there's a lack of that. But yeah, I've noticed in some clients, one in particular, where I can see it's kind of eating him up a little bit, and we talk quite often. And I think that if you it's a skill to let things go, like said about picking and choosing. About if there's nothing you can do about it, you have to let it go, and there's quite an art in that. So yeah, I can spot it in some of our clients that have got some issues with anger management.
It's probably a fair bet. I mean, I don't want to speak for other people, but maybe it's kind of a safe bet to say, we've probably all kind of had occasions in our life where we've got angry, and maybe we've been a bit short with people, maybe, and we've kind of regretted it. I think pretty much everyone, everyone kind of alive today will have had moments like that. And yeah, and I think it's, and obviously, yeah, no one, your average person, you don't want to upset anyone's feelings. And, so maybe there is that kind of thing about, I don't want to get angry. I don't want to kind of, let it out and accidentally upset people. But then, again, we've got a question about this coming up later, but that kind of negative impact of holding it in. What happens if you just kind of hold different thing, or you don't find effective ways of of letting it out? It's probably going to be more detrimental. In the long run.
Yeah, it can morph into something else if you don't let it out. And I'm lucky to have Loysten as well, to be able to, I can talk to Loysten about anything if I need to, and he can talk to me. But if you don't let things out, then it can kind of, I find my imagination turns it into something more than what it is, and it kind of becomes something that's not even real. But it still balls up. It still has a sort of a physical effect as well as a mental effect on your body.
I think that one of the things with anger though as well is, we all know people who've gone off, we all have the old saying, don't go off half cocked and all that sort of stuff, because we know people get angry and it diminishes your thinking. You don't think rationally when you're angry, and the angrier you get, the less your rationality is. You start thinking, like Lou said, you start imagining things, you start obsessing over other things, and you get this vicious cycle, and you build up and build up and build up. And then when you finally explode, that's when it leads to aggression and all sorts of other things. So you shouldn't let anger fester. You should be able to express it and deal with it in a healthy way.
So,
sorry, can I jump in on that?
Go for it, Steve. Go for it, yeah.
The really good point there is letting that anger fester. And so, for instance, if I used to have a problem with road rage, if somebody cut me up or jumped into a parking space, or I'd be on the horn, I'd be shouting. When I look back, when I take a step back and I look at that, that's not me. That's not the person I want to be. And I can't think of a situation where I got what I wanted. It's like a toddler effect of, I'm going to throw my toys around to try and get what I want. Well, it doesn't work. But it's trying to teach that as a skill, and it, pardon me. And in that moment, just taking that step back and that deep breath, and thinking, right, how do I look? What does this look like? Am I going to get what I want out of this? And losing your temper, going from that point of anger into aggression. Is a point of taking that pause. But that's a really difficult skill to learn, and you can't learn it when you're in that angry headspace. So
I'm just thinking in terms of in previous kind of episodes of Let's Talk Mate, we've kind of touched on how kind of with some of our topics, we've touched on how social media kind of affects the way we think, how way we kind of look at things. I'm just thinking in kind of today's kind of climate where pretty much everyone's got at least one social media account, possibly if they're younger than me, usually they have about 2 or 3, and we've got so much kind of information out there at the fingertips, and do you think and everything's kind of almost cross-examined in a way? Do you think I'm just wondering if that kind of guilt that people can sometimes feel, and again, so as a men's mental health chat, I guess we're kind of focusing on that guilt kind of that men can feel, about kind of anger and about that emotion. Do you feel that's maybe kind of maybe worse these days?
Like saying, I think because we live in a modern age of information and technology, and people's thoughts are broadcast within minutes or seconds of them having a thought, we've become worse at handling our anger. And I think social media is a terrible thing. It's a terrible, horrible influence, because you can post something random and irrelevant now, and people will be arguing over that in 3 weeks' time, and it'll spread and keep going, and people will be arguing, and friends will argue over all sorts of things. And we have to learn that. I say to some of my friends, I'm like, you're banned from Facebook because they got an argument over some trivial thing. And I'm like, why are you getting angry over somebody else's opinion? They don't pay your rent, they don't pay your bills, you don't even know this person, but you're getting into a heated argument with them on Facebook. As people will say things on Facebook that they will never ever say face to face with you. So it's freed them to be trolls or say whatever. We all use the term keyboard warriors now, where people feel that they can say whatever they want because there's no consequence for them. And we can get so worked up and wound up over, and I've been guilty of that myself loads of times. We end up, there's nothing wrong with a good debate, and you can be debating with random stuff, and then people will become violent, abusive, or whatever because there's no real consequences for them. But then we'll get so worked up, we get angry that this person has done something against us, and we get so vexed, we're so full of rage, and we say horrible stuff on Facebook, but we can't actually do anything. So when we slam our phones down and we go off Facebook, we're still angry. We haven't got any closure from it. And what do we do with that anger? Because it's come from something random. We take it out on friends, family, ourselves, or whatever. And I think we all, as the human race, as a collective, has to learn how to take a step back from social media and ignore stuff. Whether it's race, whatever it is, racism, war crime, whatever it is, you shouting and moaning at your friends and family on Facebook over. And I think this whole thing with COVID, the vaccinations, people arguing over all of that sort of stuff is all the same thing. Just take a step back from it, turn your phone off. And, with everything in life, social media has this massive impact on us, and we have to learn how to shut it down and put it away for a couple of weeks and just take some time away from it to clear our own headspaces, because you get some people that are permanently vexed and stressed over stuff that they've seen on Facebook that's happened thousands of miles away, or they can't do anything about, but they're attached to their phone so much they're constantly angry, and it just goes round in a circle.
Just as a general tip for anyone watching as well, I think, Loysten, you made an excellent point there. It's very easy to get, especially in this digital world where everyone's got a soapbox, to get angry. There's been times when I've had to kind of say to myself, I'm giving myself a social media timeout, especially over the last year, because I'm tired of being angry about it, and it's not healthy for me to kind of continue kind of subjecting myself to this when I can make that choice to step back and and not consume so much of it. But yeah, it's really kind of excellent points there. Thank you. I guess just because I think maybe kind of staying on that theme for a moment, because obviously, social media is such a massive thing in our modern life. There's no escaping it, is there? For most people. Steve, if you guys have any kind of just thoughts on that in terms of, is it kind of a helpful thing? Is it kind of maybe kind of precipitating, making the problems worse? Or
it's social media is an interesting topic, because at the end of the day, this is going to go out on social media. Yeah. We can use social media for a lot of good things, but I understand fully about the how it stirs that emotion. Like I was saying about the road rage, using that as an example. To get road rage, I've got to get in my car. I've got to go somewhere. Something's got to go wrong. To get upset over something on social media, all I've got to do is pick my phone up, put my password, and I'm on those social media accounts. Recently, a lot of the football clubs did a blackout for 48 hours. They were the most peaceful 48 hours of my life. Just 48 hours of bliss, because I put my phone down for 48 hours. I joined in with the movement and re-engaged with things that I enjoy doing. And I live a lot of what I do is through social media. It's through Facebook, it's through Instagram. It can reach a lot of people. It can support a lot of people, but at the same time, it can have a massive impact on their mental health and my mental health, because you get bombarded. There's constant updates. There's constant news feed, and it's just been thrown in all the time, and it is really hard to once. It's like an addiction. You've always got to have this information coming in, and it's really hard to break that cycle.
And it flickers, doesn't it? You scroll and it flickers in seconds. So you go from one emotion to another, on incident to another incident. And so you're not really giving your brain time to compute what you're actually looking at and absorbing. I find that after a little while, I think this is not doing me any good, and I put the phone down.
I find it as well around a lot of the men's mental health stuff. Sometimes you can get an overload of it. This is what we're all here because we like helping and supporting guys to deal with their emotions and their mental health. But it's constant. It's there all the time. I left a few groups recently because I was finding it was just a constant bombardment of information and emotion. And I just had to disconnect from them, click the snooze button, put them on mute for 30 days and see if that improves. So it's difficult. It's difficult to disconnect once you're involved with that, because then you feel sort of invested in it a little bit.
I hope things are going to get better. Now we're moving back to face more often. I've already sort of been involved in quite a few face-to-face meetings and groups and stuff, and I really appreciated Zoom at the start of lockdown. I thought this is amazing. It's a whole new way of connecting with people, and we will still keep it. But I think the more we go back to face and connect with our fellow humans and actually realise, you know, that actual physical connection in person, then maybe I think the world will get better again. It's been a long time now, hasn't it? 18 months or so. So I hope that'll make a difference.
Yeah. I feel like mental health and social media could be an episode of this in its own, maybe. So I think, you know, we've already kind of touched on this already with the previous questions, but I think maybe if we could focus in a bit more now on, in terms of if we don't, you know, if we don't acknowledge anger as that regular, normal, healthy, everyday emotion, if we don't deal with our anger effectively, what do we think could be some of the, you know, the negative impacts of poor anger management? Maybe, you know, and I don't, obviously it can affect, you know, obviously outbursts, you know, can affect other people around us, but also I think just in terms of ourselves in our own daily kind of physical and, you know, mental well-being. What do we think could be some of those, you know, the impacts if we don't acknowledge our anger, we don't let ourselves get angry, or we don't, you know, find healthy outlets for it?
I think it just causes a deterioration in our mental health. I mean, when my last couple of years in the military and my first 5 or 6 years out of the army, I was what we would term as a social hand grenade, because I was always on edge. And I've always thought myself as a nice, affable, relaxing person and stuff. So I wouldn't acknowledge the fact that every time I went out, I was always in an argument or a punch up or whatever. Trouble seemed to find me all the time. It was always somebody else's fault. And I had to really sit down and take a long look at myself and think, what on earth is going on? And I realized that I've got issues that I need to resolve. You know, my coping mechanisms were going out and drinking and getting drunk and all that sort of stuff. You know, I was binge drinking at the weekends and then sleeping all day and stuff like that. So I just didn't have to cope or be around other people. You know, work used to wind me up all the time. I hated my job, but I still had to pay my bills, so I'd have to go in. And I would get stressed and anxious, you know, because I need to get to work. If the bus was running late, that sets my whole day off, and I was in a negative headspace all day until I got home and I was away from everybody, and it stopped me socializing or wanting to hang out with people, because I was just dealing with all of these different emotions. And obviously being isolated, that led to depression and all sorts of other things. So, you know, if you mismanage, or if you don't look after your anger in a healthy way, it has a very big negative impact on you.
Yes, it is that slippery slope, isn't it? It can just start with little things and just kind of snowball. I can think just as one example from myself as well. I'm working in services now, but I've done my time, you know, going through services as, you know, as a patient under local NHS mental health teams, and yeah, it's so many kind of, for me, one kind of impact that kind of stands out is in terms of maybe kind of self-harm or kind of impact on self-harming. So I've never been someone who would, you know, who cut myself or burnt myself, but for me, my self-harming was, I would punch walls, and it would be because, you know, it was that classic thing of like, I'm angry at the situation, I'm frustrated at the situation, and I don't want to lash out at anyone, you know, and it was like, well, I don't want to get angry at anyone, I don't want to let myself get angry at anyone else, but I need to do so. So I wouldn't do anything with it, and that would end up with me just kind of punching. What was a miracle? I've never broken my hands. But you know, it's, I guess for me, that's a very kind of tangible example of how it could have affected well-being.
When I was much younger, I think I had an anger issue as well, and I'd punch walls and doors and things like that, and I think that, you know, I'd sort of battles in my mind with various people that it would keep me awake at night, and I wouldn't sleep properly. Thankfully, I've really put that to bed now, and I'm sleeping really well. But I think that you'll be surprised. I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I think it'll have if you let it eat you up inside, and it goes on and on and on, it can have an effect on your physical health as well. You know, stress and anxiety and anger, I'm sure, can cause all sorts of problems with your physical health as well.
Steve, if I could just come back to you quickly. So I know you mentioned about Obviously, thank you for being so open with us as well. You mentioned about kind of how you kind of struggle with the road rage. In terms of the guys you kind of work with on the daily basis as well, do you see a lot of that in terms of how it can affect their kind of physical and mental health when they're not dealing with anger effectively or in those healthy ways?
It's a little bit difficult to put it all into words. I can relate to what Loysten's saying around the anger. Now, I managed to get my sounds about probably 15 years ago. I managed to get my anger under control. Up until that point, I was constantly getting into scrapes. I played a lot of football when I was younger, and I used to get sent off a lot. I used to get into a lot of fights on the pitch. Never my fault. It was always someone else. And in the end, for me, the last bit, I broke my hand, like you were saying, but you've never broken anything. I broke my hand. I punched something, broke my hand, and I thought that were it. So I'm just hurting myself here. I'm damaging relationships. I'm damaging myself physically. And that was the last time I can remember losing my temper. And since then, I still get angry. I still get upset about things, but I deal with it differently. With the guys I work with through Andy's Man Club, it's a little bit different because the guys are coming in a lot of the time. They're opening up about their feelings, and it's listening to them. It's listening to what's being said, and it's not there to give them advice or give them to treat what's going on. It's just being a pair of ears and being understanding. With the football stuff, it's really nice because a lot of the time, when the guys turn up, you can see, if they're having a bad day, some of them will tell you, but when they come off the pitch at the end of it, they've had that time just to unwind and just to let that emotion. They've kicked a football around for an hour. It's the same thing as punching something and lashing out, but you've done it in a controlled way. But I think we're going to go on to that later on. So,
definitely. Yeah, I'm going to make sure we end on a nice kind of positive note. I think there are. I mean, I don't know. Again, we touched on so many of the negative impacts earlier on in terms of it is self-damaging if we don't whether that's kind of physical, in that kind of physical way, if we're feeling run down or we've injured ourselves because we've lashed out at someone or something, and or relation in that relationship, or when it comes to relationships with others. And I mean, obviously, I'm aware there's probably kind of quite a significant issue that we've maybe kind of been quite gentle around so far in terms of that kind of when it comes to anger and potentially kind of lashing out at other people, whether that's friends, family, whatever. But again, it's, I think, we've got, it's in terms of, if we can get in and get people to kind of acknowledge and talk about their anger, let it out, find healthy outlets early on, and that's hopefully, that would negate so many issues. And again, I probably, just going back to the recent football example and the social media one, just because it seems like very kind of relevant, kind of, example recently. I just wonder about how many people who were kind of, who were going online and venting that abuse, or kind of, if they just, how many people, if they'd found one more effective ways to kind of let out that steam, let out that emotion, they're obviously very angry about something, if they'd found ways to kind of, let that out healthily before, maybe it wouldn't have led to such a ugly situation, coming out of the Euros. And there is that kind of, obviously it's very awkward, but there's a kind of sticky, subject as well about, domestic abuse rising around kind of football tournaments. And you wonder, do we need to be, just kind of doing more to kind of encourage people to find those healthy outlets. So I just want to obviously kind of caveat that with saying that, I'm not obviously, implying that everyone who struggles with anger will go to, hit art. Obviously I just want to, put that out there, but, I think it's obviously quite difficult to, ignore the link sometimes, isn't it? So I'm guessing. So obviously, I do want to finish things out, on that positive. And we've talked a lot about the negative impacts and what can happen. So I think, I want people to kind of come away from this today, kind of feeling, feeling with a positive vibe, or feeling that they've got something useful out of it. So maybe, if we could now go on to discuss, what do we think are those what do we think are the healthy ways to manage anger, to help not just kind of manage it, but also to the healthy ways to let it out, in that controlled manner, to kind of, almost like that kind of pressure release valve almost. I mean, Steve, you mentioned about kind of the football pitch and how, just how useful it is. You can see people coming in, they've had maybe before they get on the pitch, they've had a shocker of a day, they're anxious, they're sad, they're wound up about things, but just taking that time to expend the energy and and kick a ball about for 90 minutes, how much of a release that is, and then how you can see the difference in people afterwards.
It's I think I can only speak from my own experience. The things I do to help unwind, to release those emotions, are normally physical things. So it's going for a bike ride, going for a walk. I've got a dog. I take my dog for a walk, and we talk it through. And the best thing about that is he can't answer back, and he don't have an opinion. So whatever I say is right, and he agrees with it. The football's a different way of doing it, because rather than talking about what's going on, or it just gives you something else to focus on for that time. And that can be any activity. It can be sitting and playing on a console. It can be sitting and watching TV for an hour. Just distracts you from whatever's gone on and breaks that cycle for that period of time. And so that's what sort of I do. And it helps. It puts me in a zone, and because I do it regularly, it resets it every time.
I mean, Loysten, no, just in terms of you guys as well. So any kind of when it comes to kind of healthy ways to kind of to manage your anger and letting it out, and any top tips from you guys?
I think physical activity is always good. Anger is great fuel. If you're going to the gym or cycling or running, anger can fuel you, and you can really go for it. So that's always good. But I think it's always good to have a sit down and actually find out what's making you angry. Having a look at that there, is it driving? If it's road rage, is it particular times or particular roads that you use? Try and find a different route. That sometimes help. It's finding what makes you angry. I used to play FIFA and Call of Duty on my Xbox. I haven't played them for years, or I'll play FIFA on my own on the easiest settings by myself, and I'll enjoy it. Call of Duty, the same thing. I couldn't play those online against other people because I used to get so angry. I would break control pads in my hand. I'd throw them at the walls. It was ridiculous. I stopped playing them, and I was a lot happier. So it's looking at stuff you can realistically stop doing that makes you angry. You have to make those changes yourself, and you have to be have a good look at yourself and have a serious, honest conversation about stuff that's making you angry and what you can, and what you can stop, what you can't. When I lived in Milton Keynes, lots of wide open spaces. Sunday afternoon, I used to love practicing my own well-being. Like anything in mental health, you've got to take time out to do some well-being for yourself and looking after yourself. I'd go and sit in an empty park and scream at the sun. I was like a wolf howling at the moon. I'd get whatever I was angry with, I'd go there, have a quick look around, nobody around, I'd scream, effing blind, whatever. Do that for 10 minutes, and I'd feel so much more relaxed. So it's finding, what works in a healthy way for yourself that hasn't got a negative impact on other people.
With me nowadays, or in this current sort of period of time, it's been down to resentment. So something that just keeps coming back, something that in relationships, and I've taken a really good hard look at my entire life and all the things that have bugged me. And like Loysten said, I've taken a really good look at myself. So, looking at where my part in that relationship was, and just looking at what I can do to rectify the situation. And by doing that, I've actually been able to relinquish some resentment that keeps coming up in my head and going over and repeating itself. Where I've looked at where my part in it was and what I can do to make things better, and just solely looked at that and let go of my resentment. That's really, really helped. Physical exercise as well, the other thing that the other two guys have touched on, is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I really, really love a bit of physical exercise. I get out on my bike, that helps.
On that note, I would say if going to the gym is a coping mechanism, is a coping technique for some guys, I would say be a bit careful about kind of how much weight you do when you're angry, because when you're angry and you've got all that adrenaline, you always end up pushing yourself, and sometimes I've regretted it in the mornings when I've woken up afterwards and I can't move my arms properly.
One other thing,
Steve,
one other thing, and it's something we're doing now, having that, if you've got a group of people you can talk to, if you've got friends, family that you can open up to without that fear of being judged, that is a key point, because everything we've talked about is how you sort of regulate it and you manage it yourself, but actually getting it off your chest, speaking to other people is sort of key. And I know myself, I go to Andy's Man Club. I don't go as much as I should do, but that's because of everything else in life takes over. But when things start going downhill, I normally go along and just speak to the guys there and listen to what's being said, and just getting it off your chest. It's gone. It's in the open. It's there, and that's been quite key. I noticed when I was going regularly, my mental health, my well-being was in a much better situation. So, but yeah, so it's about taking both sides of it.
Definitely, and I think.
So I think Steve hit the nail on the head there. I think, with everything for men with regards to mental health, a lot of the struggles that we have comes from the fact that we don't talk to people. We haven't got people to speak to about it, or we think we don't have. And also it's trying to find the language to use. And I think we have to normalize men talking about their mental health and making people understand that actually there's a time and a place to do that, and you can actually sit down and talk about it. We don't always have to be the strong silent types or resilient and not say or do anything, because we're human, and if we're not expressing all of our emotions, we're missing a part of life, and we need to say that it's okay to do those things.
And sometimes as well, because we talk about this quite a lot in our online peer groups, it can be about if you've not got anyone with you immediately to talk to, maybe just kind of, if you can't get it out there verbally, get it down on a bit of paper, write it out, do anything you can to get it out of your head. And, whether it's verbally or whether it's on a bit of paper in front of you, if we get it out of our head and we let it stop kind of circling around and building, that would probably be my biggest tip. I just want to thank everyone so much for taking part, and also thank you for kind of sharing so openly and honestly today. Again, the goal of this podcast is to encourage men to talk openly about these issues, different issues that affect our mental well-being. So thank you so much for kind of sharing, from your personal stories today to everyone. And thank you. I've really enjoyed it. I love doing this. And keep an eye. So for everyone kind of listening, keep an eye on Spotify. So we are now aiming to release these monthly on Spotify, and we'll look forward to being back to next month. So next month's episode, we're going to be focusing on students' mental health and some of the challenges that students may face around their well-being. I'll just on that note, I think I would say goodbye, and please tune in next month, everyone. Big thank you to Loysten, Steve, and Lou for this afternoon. Thank you so much, guys.
For all the latest on Let's Talk Mate and other Solent Mind stories, follow us on social media. That is at Solent Mind on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. See you next month for the latest episode.